want to introduce Paul Dickens. He's a personal mentor of mine. He collaborates with Saws and the Carolina Mountain Club, and he's a traditional tools teacher with Crosscut. And yeah, I want to introduce him, and you can add anything else about your background before you get going, Paul.
Well, thank you, Christy. Yes, I'm Paul Dickens, and I am a volunteer traditional tool trainer with Saws. I am a C. Sawyer crosscut evaluator. Um, and as Christy mentioned, I'm also the wilderness crew scheduler and leader with the Carolina Mountain Club. And the wilderness areas I do most of my work in are the Shining Rock and Middle Prong of Western North Carolina. Going to be talking about brush scythes and other tools for woody brush. All right. So my purpose, I want to share crew experience clearing woody brush in North Carolina wilderness, what we think are the best tools. I want to introduce the wilderness trail community to the brush scythe, which I think is an overlooked traditional tool. And I'm going to suggest suppliers and web pages for equipment and for details on using these tools. Now, a disclaimer, I'll be mentioning several companies and suppliers for scythes and other equipment for woody brush. I have no financial interest or ties with these firms, but these are companies and people that I buy equipment from and that I recommend. There may be other suppliers that I'm not aware of. And so when I bring up some slides with supplier information, you may want to take a screenshot if you want to capture that information or take notes. So woody brush is not the annual weeds that die back each year along the trail. Woody brush are blackberry, they're bushes, they're small trees that grow into the trail and eventually close off the trail corridor. Woody brush in the southern Appalachians occurs on balds and other past disturbed areas that are more open to the sun. And after a fire, woody brush is often the first thing to come back, and it grows fast and thick. So woody brush, what are the problems? Woody brush distracts from trail user experience. Hiking through wet, overgrown brush is like walking through a car wash. You get soaked. Woody brush gets hikers lost when the main trail looks the same as the user trails because they're both overgrown. And so overgrown trails and lost hikers, that can become a search and rescue issue. Woody brush unchecked can cause trails to be lost. Trails overgrown with woody brush take a large effort and amount of time, to clear back out and reclaim. So in my parts of the Appalachians, the brush that we mostly deal with is blackberry, blueberry, rhododendron, mountain laurel, and mountain honeysuckle. There are places where we run into dog hobble. Beech trees make thickets, and those can be a problem. And then, of course, invasives. If you've ever had to deal with an overgrown mess of multifloral rose, you know how horrible that can be. The worst woody brush is blackberry. Blackberry thickets grow from seeds and from established roots. And where blackberry takes over, especially after a fire, it's hard to control. A blackberry has a 3-year life cycle. A new growth cane in year 1 that then survives into year 2 to flower and bear fruit. Then that cane in year 3 dies, but it provides stored energy for new growth. Established blackberry, after the first cutting, you go in and clear it, it grows back thick and tall with new canes. But when you cut that growth again in the second year, and you don't let those canes flower and bear fruit, the regrowth that happens after that is stunted. And with the third cutting, the blackberries that remain just give up and remain small, and the trail maintenance corridor is much easier to maintain in the third and following years. So don't skip the annual brushing of blackberry. Late fall and early spring is the best time before the blackberry leaf out and before annual vegetation comes up. If you don't brush out blackberry every year, it comes back in 3 years just as tall and thick as before. Note on the right picture there, note how high the blackberry canes are compared to Isaac. 6 to 8 foot tall blackberry canes are not unusual. In wilderness trails, we cut blackberry back 4 to 6 feet because when the blackberries get wet, the canes will fall over into the trail. So overgrown rhododendron, mountain laurel, blueberry, and similar woody brush along trails, when it's out of control, it requires a heavy brush out, including cutting out whole branches and even cutting out entire bushes. Once heavily brushed, the regrowth should be cut back at least every other year. And remember to cut branches flush with the main stem. And if you cut out an entire bush, cut it off flat with the ground. Clearing overgrown roadies, it is hard work. One person working 4 to 5 hours might get 500 feet of trail cleared. And so once the effort is made to reclaim a trail from overgrown roadies and other woody bushes, at least every other year to cut them back. Those that have experience with dog hobble know that it grows fast and it often requires annual brushing to keep it back from the trail. And for dog hobble, long-handled shears are the best tool. So this is mountain dog hobble. It's a beautiful plant where it grows, but it grows fast and it can overwhelm trail corridors. Like its name, dog hobble thickets are hard to walk through. It tangles up your feet. Dog hobble, where you have it, generally requires annual brushing to keep trails clear. So dog hobble, that's the beautiful plant that trail maintainers and trail builders learn to hate. Clearing limits for brushing. These pictures are from the 2025 Forest Service Trail Construction and Maintenance Manual. Now, brushing limits depend upon trail class and user type, such as pack and saddle or hiker pedestrian. For specific trails you are maintaining, refer to the Forest Service Trail Management Objectives document. The TMOs are done for each Forest Service Ranger District and are generally indexed by a Forest Service trail number. Now, sometimes a heavy brush out wider than the TMO limits is needed to reclaim an overgrown trail. Annual or 2-year brushing after that is lighter. And so after the heavy brush out, we do allow the brush to grow back to sort of the TMO objectives on brushing limits. Now, this trail needs a heavy brush out. It's an overgrown mess of blueberry. I love my blueberries, but I don't like blueberry bushes overgrowing trails. So what are the best tools for this type of woody brushing? It's not the brush hook or the brush axe. I've used them in the past. I don't use them anymore. In fact, CMC retired our brush axe tools. Nobody uses them because they're not very good tools. And then the old swing blade weed whip. Well, those don't cut woody brush. And so they're not useful for woody brush. And also they use your arm. Now, a power weed eater with a brush blade, would be great, but this is wilderness. We can't use those types of tools. So the best tools for overgrown rhododendron, mountain laurel, and blueberry are long handle shears, loppers, and a small handsaw. Most trail crews have loppers and handsaws. Many don't have long-handled shears, and they don't understand how useful shears are. The long-handled shears are great for pruning and can cut small finger-sized branches. The shears work well on blackberry. The shears are the only efficient tool for cutting dog hobble. And with the long handles, you don't have to bend over to reach the brush. The problem with conventional head shears that are short is you have to bend over and stoop. Now, the long-handled shears I have in the slide are generally available from forestry suppliers. You can also find them online at landscaping supply companies. Now, Now, these tools are not, what they sell at the home store because these are better than residential type equipment. The Corona shears on the left, those are the AH 6950s. Those are about $100 with shipping and tax. They hold up well. The handles are aluminum, the blades are metal. The aluminum handles help with weight. The ARS KL 1000L shears on the right, those are awesome. They're professional tools. They cost about $100 a pair. They're light with aluminum handles, stainless steel blades, and you can replace the stainless steel blades. I will tell you, volunteers that come out with me that use the ARS shears, they just love them. In terms of loppers and shears, maintenance, you need to keep them clean and dry. So clean them up in the field. And you need to know that the steel blades on the Corona shears and the loppers will rust. When I return from the field, I inspect my shears and loppers and I sharpen them before storing. I use a mill file and a diamond hone to sharpen my shears and loppers, and I coat them with WD-40 to prevent rust. And that way I keep this equipment, ready to go for the next crew day. So that's some information about, long-handled shears and loppers and hand saws for things like rhododendron and laurel. Long-handled shears are a companion tool to the brush scythes. And here's a picture of one of my crews and the tools we actually use to maintain a trail. So I've discussed the need for woody brushing and not allowing our wilderness trails to become overgrown. And I've discussed tools that we find most useful for woody brushing, including the long-handled shears. Now we're going to discuss the best tool of all for woody brush, especially blackberry, the brush scythe. So this trail crew finished annual brush out of the logging camp meadow on the Mountain Laurel, on the Fork Mountain Trail in the Shining Rock Wilderness. The gentleman on the right let me use his European brush scythe 3 years ago. He has a small homestead and uses a scythe to clear ditches and banks on his property. I was not aware of how useful and satisfying brush scythe technology is. We use the traditional tools of crosscut saw and axe to maintain trails in wilderness. I think we overlooked the scythe. Scythe technology has been around longer than the crosscut saw. There is a community of scythe users and experts in the homestead and small sustainable agriculture space who keep this technology alive and thriving. I don't see much use of scythes in trail work, wilderness, and otherwise. I think we need to add the scythe to our trail maintenance toolkit. And so the remainder of the presentation, I'm going to talk about types of scythes, scythe terminology, and some other details. And I'm also going to include information on where you can purchase brush scythes. So there are two general types of scythes, European and American. The European and the American scythe handle, the shape of the handles and the geometry is different, but they both solve the same technical problem, which is how to hold and swing a sharp blade very close to the ground to mow grass or clear brush. This is a slide from Scythe Supply. So this is a European style scythe. So Scythe Supply in Perry, Maine is a source and information, a place you can source scythes, and also they have great informational pages on how to use scythes, how to sharpen them. Other companies with European scythe equipment and information are One Scythe Revolution in Minnesota and Scythe Works in British Columbia. And so if you're interested in European style scythes, these folks can provide you everything you need to get started. Scythe terminology. This is a little bit about, this is similar to when we teach, crosscut skills and axe skills. There's terminology that goes along with an axe. Well, in a scythe handle is called a snath, S-N-A-T-H. It rhymes with path and bath. So a scythe has a snath. A scythe has a toe, a heel, a beard, a chine, and a tang. The chine provides stiffness to the blade, and it also is used to set the bevel angle on the blade. The width and thickness of the beard determine if the blade is for mowing or brushing. And then a ring or clamp holds the tang to the snath. A scythe outfit is everything you need to get started. Now, this outfit is for a custom fit European scythe. You provide your personal measurements, your hip joint height, and your cubit to have the scythe snath made for you. And then you select a scythe blade for your purpose, mowing or brushing. So what do these cost? The current cost of a European scythe outfit with everything that you need is about $500. For just a snath and good quality scythe blade, the cost is $450 to $300 with tax and shipping. So this is a deeper look at the European scythe and blade, or European snath and blade. The snath is straight. It may have a slight bend. They're most always made of wood. The front grip is above the snath on a stem. The grips face away from the blade toward the user, and the scythe tang is angled to hold the blade at the correct angle to the ground. European snaths and blades are known for lightweight. This setup is about 6 pounds. Oftentimes you can get them 5 pounds and less. So that's the European snath and blade. Now, the American snath and blade, this may be the one that you're more familiar with because you find them in antique stores and, in the back of old barns. But the American snath and blade, the snath is curved so the front grip handle is at arm's length and the blade is at the correct angle to the ground. The grips face forward toward the blade and the user reaches over the snath to hold the grips. And the blade tang has no angle or a very shallow blade angle. It's the bend of the snath that provides the blade angle to the ground. As I mentioned, on a European scythe, you stand behind the snath. On an American snath, you reach over the snath to hold the grips. And the reason for that on the American scythe blade is heavier. It's not tapered at the tip. And so to balance the weight of the blade on the American snath, you reach over the snath. Now, the grips on the American snath are adjustable to fit the user. European snaths are generally custom made to fit a particular scythe user, but there are adjustable European snaths that you can get to fit users of different height. And so, like if you're supplying equipment for a trail crew, you're going to want an adjustable snath that you can change the grips to match the different height of your crew members. So that's the two general types of scythes. Seymour is the brand name long associated with the American scythe. And the aluminum American snath handle is recommended for trail work. The traditional bent wood American snath, you can get those, but they are heavy. The very light aluminum snath offsets the heavier American scythe blade, and it also moves the center of mass closer to the ground, which is an advantage when you're doing heavy brushing. So Seymour Midwest in Indiana is the source of American snaths and blades, and they have a web page. And on their web page, they have a very excellent scythe guide, all about the American scythe, how to set them up, how to fit them to yourself, how to file them. It's a really good reference. And so that's a place you can go if you want an American scythe. I mentioned that there are adjustable European snaths. One of them was developed by an organization called Scythe Connection. Their adjustable European snath is available from Lehman's in Ohio. And they have a couple of different lengths. The 59-inch snath is for people of average stature. They have a 66-inch and even a 72-inch scythe, which are made for taller folks. And this Scythe Connection scythe is also available from Scythe Works in Canada. I recently purchased two of the Scythe Connection adjustable scythes. This is what you get. You get the handles and the grips, and they come with the D-ring clamps and a scythe guard. The Scythe Owner's Manual. This is an excellent resource. I have not been able to find it online, but if you buy the Scythe Connection scythe, you get a copy. And I'll recommend it. It's a really good comprehensive guide to the European scythe. Also, ScytheWorks in Perry, Maine has a lot of really good online information. When I get a European scythe, before I assemble it, I do treat the fresh wood with 2 coats of linseed oil 1 day apart. Let's talk a bit more about scythe blades. Scythe blades are classified by purpose, mowing or brushing. Mowing is cutting grass, hay, or grains. Brushing is cutting thick weeds in woody stemmed plants. So you can see here a grass blade is narrow and long as 36 inches. You could actually mow your lawn with one of those when it's sharpened well. And then there are ditch blades, and then there's brush blades. Brush blades are thick and short, and they are made for cutting woody brush. They can cut saplings 1/2 to 3/4 inch diameter. The ditch blade is sort of in between. It'll cut woody brush, woody stems up to 1/2 inch thick, but it'll also cut some of the grass and the annual weeds. A brush blade really doesn't cut grass at all because it's not designed for that. Scythe users, some more terminology. A scythe user is generally called a mower, and the act of running a scythe is called scything or mowing. So scythe blades for trail work. These are some that I use. The top one is a 45 centimeter European brush blade. The middle is a 50 centimeter European ditch blade, and the bottom is a 20-inch American ditch blade. So you can kind of see in the picture how the tang angle on the European scythe blades is steep. They're bent. Whereas on the American scythe blade, there's no angle or it's very shallow. European scythe blades are sharpened by peening, particularly the grass blades. Now, European brush blades and ditch blades can also be filed. American scythe blades are filed. Some other things, when you buy a European scythe, their length is stamped in centimeters on the back of the tang. The American scythe, it'll be stamped length in inches. The European blades are cast and hand forged. They actually hammer these out to a very narrow tapered tip. The American blades are cast and milled, and the American blades are not tapered. They're heavier and thicker. Now, these are right-handed scythe blades. Left-handed scythe blades are made, but they're not as available. For a left-handed scythe, the grips on the scythe are reversed. So you don't have to buy a different scythe. Just reverse the grips. All right. A little bit more detail on the scythes and some of their parts. The blade attachment to the scythe on a European scythe is with a clamp, a D-ring clamp. There's on the left is the Scythe Connection design. On the right is the Perry, Maine design. And then very important for the wooden scythe is a scythe saver. It's a metal plate that goes over the tang slot in the handle to protect it. On a European scythe, if you want to change the angle of the blade to the ground, you can use a shim in the D-ring to change that angle. The blade attachment to the American scythe is a clamp with a hafting angle plate, and this is the Seymour design, and this goes way back. You find an old vintage American wooden scythe. This clamp goes back probably 100 years. Now, hafting angle is the angle of the blade relative to the arc of the scythe swing. This is kind of advanced, but the hafting angle is a user preference and it can be set in the field. On the American scythe, the angle of the blade to the ground is really controlled by the bend of the snath. Bending the tang on the American snath is pretty heavy duty work. So the most important thing, fitting the snath to the user. It makes the difference between a scythe that is ergonomically correct and efficient and a scythe that's difficult to use and a disappointment. So these pictures illustrate a snath properly fitted to the mower. You should stand straight with your arms extended and not have to bend or stoop. The back grip of the snath, if you're standing, like on the right, this where Isaac is, the back grip of the snath should fit under your armpit when the scythe is stood on the ground, and your hand should reach the front grip, and that distance from your shoulder to your hand is called your cubit. The snath on the left was made to my custom measurements. I have 33 inches to my hip socket, and I have an 18-inch cubit. The snath on the right is adjustable, and we adjusted it to fit Isaac the day he came out as a volunteer. So I can tell you that a properly fitted snath is an ergonomic joy. A snath that is too long or too small is not efficient, and it's a bad experience for a mower. And I think maybe some people who picked up an old American scythe and tried to use it probably did not understand how to adjust it to fit them. And that may be why they didn't like it. So scything. YouTube has good videos on scything through brush and grass. So you can enter the words scything brush or scythe mowing. Some key points: you keep the blade low and close to the ground. That's how a scythe works. The roots hold the grass or the woody stem to the ground, and the scythe blade then slices through it. You rotate at your waist and you shift your weight between your legs to sweep the blade along an arc. And it's important, slice, don't chop. A sharp scythe blade moving along the arc, it slices into and through the grass and brush. So scything is, in a way, is a little bit like crosscut sawing in that it uses the motion of your full body and weight. You don't crosscut with your arms. You don't scythe with your arms. You use your entire body. It's easier and more efficient than cutting methods that use arm strength, like a swing blade or a brush blade or brush axe. With a well-fitting snath, scything is a smooth, natural movement. New mowers quickly figure it out. I find out that volunteers, after they've run a scythe for 15 to 20 minutes, it's like muscle memory. So I think your wilderness crews should have brush scythes for tall weeds, blackberry, and woody brush that a brush blade can cut. And then for stuff that's bigger than the scythe can cut, take shears and loppers and a small handsaw. One note: brush scythes don't work well on dog hobble. The blade gets tangled up in the foliage and you can't cut close to the ground. So for dog hobble, you need to use your long-handled shears. Now, there's some other equipment you need with your scythe other than a snath and blade. You're going to need tools for sharpening. So a peening jig and a hammer are used for sharpening European blades. Stones and stone holders are used for honing, both in the shop and the field. And the stone holder contains water. It has a clip to hook onto your belt. The water is to lubricate the stone. Mill and flat files are used for sharpening American scythes. And a European brush blade or ditch blade can also be filed with a mill file. So in terms of stones, there's two types. There's natural and synthetic. The synthetic are more aggressive. You'll also find the natural stones tend to be used more on grass scythes, where you're going for a really sharp edge. The shape of the stone is important because that is designed to give you the right blade angle when you run the stone down the blade and use the chine as a guide. Now, the companies that sell European scythes and outfits, they have videos and resources on peening, and you can also find YouTube videos. You can enter peening scythe blades, and you'll get some good references. The hammer in the picture is 8 ounces. I've seen experienced peeners use heavier hammers. I think that's a personal preference. But this is the extra equipment I have to maintain my European and American scythes. So just a few pictures about what's involved. For peening, you need a peening block. It's just a 6x6, post piece. You also do need hearing protection because it's noisy. But using the jig, it's pretty straightforward, and I picked up the skill quickly, and it goes fast. Um, each day after using a scythe in the field, I will inspect the blade and to decide if it needs touch-up or sharpening. Unless I hit a rock, I rarely find dings or bends in scythe blades that I use on blackberry and woody brush. I take a honing stone to the field with my brush and ditch blades, and at lunchtime, midday, I'll stone them. I'm finding that the scythes hold up pretty well, and you don't really need to repeen them every time you come back from the field. You just check the quality of the blade, and oftentimes you can get by with honing for several trips. On the American scythe, it's filed. Kind of like filing an axe, a little different. It's filed on the top side, the back side is flat, and you use the chine to kind of set your bevel angle. The file goes from the edge and it's just barely touching the top of the chine. And so the bevel edge on an American scythe is about 12 degrees. I take a mill file with me to the field when I'm using an American scythe in case I need to touch it up midday or in case I hit a rock and get a ding. I mentioned that Seymour West has a good guide on the American scythe. It's got good information on how to sharpen an American scythe. And for both scythe types, European and American, I'm going to take a wrench and other tools to the field with me so that if the blade gets loose, I can tighten either the D-ring or I can tighten up the clamp on the American snap. So the scythe guard and storage, these are examples of what I use. I use the same channel material that we use for crosscut saw guards to guard the sharp edge on my scythes. You can also purchase, I've seen for sale, and I've seen people make canvas bags to put their scythe blades in. I store my scythes with the guard on, making sure they're dry, and I have a dry space under my house, in the tall space under my house, and I hang them there. The most important thing is to clean your scythe blades and your snaps in the field before leaving for home. Make sure the snap, the blade, and the guard are dry. If you bring back a scythe from the field wet in the guard, it will rust. I use WD-40 to keep my blades clean and remove moisture. And I don't put a guard on a scythe blade that is wet. I think I mentioned that. And before storing, before hanging them up, I wipe them all down with WD-40. And then I will occasionally put some more linseed oil on the wooden handles. So that's a bit about scythe technology and terminology, sharpening, how to store them. So let's make some comparisons. The scythe versus the weed whip sling blade, because I see trail crews going out with weed whip sling blades. There's no fair comparison. On the left are an American scythe and a European scythe. Both of those are ditch blades. The weed whip, well, the scythe will cut weeds, blackberry, and woody stem brush. Weed whip will choke on blackberry. It can't cut woody brush. A scythe uses whole body movement. The weed whip is a workout for your arms. The scythe is just a better, more efficient, more capable tool. Scythe versus weed eater. What do you think? Well, a scythe has basically one moving part, and it's human powered. Weed eater, well, that's a complicated machine with many parts and also many bits of PPE you have to take. When you're using a scythe, it's basic trail maintenance PPE. Safety glasses, a hard hat, and gloves. If you use a weed eater, you got to have hearing protection and other stuff. And so the scythe is not just for wilderness. I think it is a sustainable replacement for power weed eaters everywhere. Why? Less weight, a lot less weight, because most trail crews that are sent out with weed eaters, they're not using residential weed eaters. We buy these landscape grade weed eaters, that weigh 10, 15 pounds and have to have a sling so that you can carry the weight. Uh, Brush scythe has no noise except that very satisfying slicing sound as you cut through the brush. No hearing protection, no high frequency vibration. I know some people that run weed eaters, at the end of the day, they get the tingly hands because it's been vibrating them all day. No fumes, no fuel or heavy batteries. And then if you're using a string weed eater, you're not spraying monofilament plastic everywhere. And so I really would challenge you. Scythe is not just a tool for wilderness, but it's great for just non-wilderness what maintenance of brush outs and weeds. And I have volunteers that come to me that have trails where they've used weed eaters in the past. They ask to borrow a brush scythe because it's just a lot more enjoyable. So all the boxes are checked. I think the brush scythe wins. Before I get to takeaways, I want to share Isaac's quote. After his first day using a scythe for trail maintenance, volunteer Isaac said, "The most satisfying tool I have ever used." I have had other trail volunteers who used a scythe for the first time at the end of the day expressed similar feelings. They were just amazed at how efficient it was, how much work we got done, and it was just fun. So takeaways from or what I hope you take away from this presentation. Crews need to keep ahead of woody brush and don't allow wilderness trails to overgrow. I know this has been a problem in the forests, in North Carolina and surrounding states. We get wilderness areas that because of a fire or just because they haven't had routine maintenance, they get overgrown with woody stuff. And it is a huge amount of work to clear them out. And then once you get them clear, don't let them grow back. Um, Tools for woody brush include loppers, long handle shears, hand saws, and brush scythes. And so, what I think I'm introducing today is I'm not sure that everybody is giving their trail crews long handled shears. And I think that the wilderness and larger trail maintenance communities seem unaware of scythe technology. I think it may be the overlooked or the forgotten traditional tool. Brush scythes are crazy effective on certain types of brush. So I think you need to buy your trail crews long-handled shears and scythes with brush and ditch blades. And I would suggest that you leave the weed eater behind. The scythe is an efficient, more sustainable tool and the only tool for wilderness trail maintenance. So the anonymous scythers would like to know if you have any questions. I think Christy is going to moderate questions.
Yeah. Thanks, Paul. Yeah, I'll be moderating questions. So either raise your hand or put stuff in the chat. And yeah, I'd like to second something that Paul kind of hinted to in his presentation is that as far as the right tool for the job, it also has to do with like how people are going to enjoy their day the most. Like if they're a volunteer, if they'll come out again if they enjoy their day. And uh, you know, there's one kind of zone that you're in if you're running a weed whacker or you have ear pro in and you're brushing for someone chainsawing. there's like that kind of mode versus like using a crosscut, using a scythe. Is kind of a more rewarding day for many volunteers and workers and stuff like that. So think about uh if you have the right tool, sometimes the traditional tool is actually just like more pleasant to be using. Okay, I have a hand raised for Morgan. Will you come up and ask your question?
Sure. Hi, Paul. Great presentation. Um, I own a couple of scythes and not as good at them as you are, but a couple of observations um, on your slide about uh, cutting width for the trail maintenance. I've always recommended the uphill should be whatever the prescribed width is, but the downhill side should be pretty close to the downhill outside edge of the trail. Otherwise, you tend to get trail creep down the hill if you're not careful, particularly with the woody growth. Um,
And
oh,
and I agree, Morgan. I had a little note in the slide I forgot to verbalize, but yeah, on side hill slopes, you want to cut the uphill vegetation and you want the downhill vegetation to be pushing people to the upside of the trail.
exactly. Yeah. And then I've noticed I've been hiking some pretty overgrown trails recently in Pennsylvania, and I've noticed that 1 year old rhododendron growth snaps off really easily just by hand. And I've cleared several miles of trail up here using that technique because I didn't think to bring a tool along. And then I've always wondered, my American scythe has an aluminum shaft. And I've always wondered about, using them in the places like you do up on Black Balsam Knob or out in Pisgah or wherever you're, in the wilderness there. Um, do you have any concerns about lightning with those?
I've had people mention that you're carrying a lightning rod. Um, I tend to I actually personally prefer the European snath, European design. Um, but the American scythe being a little heavier for like trail crew use, like if you got a whole bunch of blackberry you got to clear out of a burn area, they're pretty crazy efficient. But yeah, be aware you're carrying a potential lightning rod. So if it's thunderstorm, you want to lay it down and sort of put it to the side. The
Okay.
problem with the
Um,
traditional wooden American snath is it just the weight starts to get a bit high.
and then two last comments. One is I'm just curious if you have any comments about using the scythe on slopes. The the ditch blade makes it sound like clearing a ditch might be easy with a scythe, but um, I haven't done that much. I'm just curious, particularly on the uphill side of a trail, if it has a
You
pretty good slope to the cut bank. What do you
well,
do?
you kind of adjust how you stand. You don't stand at the bottom of the hill. You kind of stand on the side slope. If it's a really bad hill, you could, and you have an adjustable grips, you could actually, choke up on it some. Um, you did mention about the roadies, the regrowth. You can cut regrowth of roadies with a brush scythe. It goes right through it. Now, when they get
Yeah,
2 or 3 years old, then you got to get the loppers and the handsaw.
yeah. And then my last observation is just one of my favorite AT pictures is of the uh, volunteer crew from Tennessee Eastman Hiking Club silhouetted along the top of Round Bald, and they have scythes over their shoulders that they're carrying out to clear trail with.
Yeah, when you get a team of people with scythes, it's amazing how much you can get done in a day. Um,
Yeah. Well, thank you. Like I said, great presentation.
Yeah, thanks, Morgan. In the chat, just trying to go in order of noticing things. Denise says, so if I have volunteers, should I go with the American model, correct? And I think that lends itself to what Paul was saying about um, maybe a trail crew having using the metal handle, but do you want to jump in, Paul, about
well, it kind of has to do with the origin. The American scythe was a ditch blade and it was used by construction crews. It's just really a heavier duty tool that can cut thicker stuff. It won't cut grass, but it can cut thicker stuff. I think if I had volunteers, I usually take the European scythes out because they're lighter and they're a bit funner. Uh, I kind of save the American scythes when I want to do some really heavy duty brushing.
Mhm. All right, Steve, you have your hand raised. Will you come off mute and ask a question?
Yeah, thank you, Paul, for your presentation. I'm considered we're sitting on our butts cutting brush with loppers and hand saws, and it goes really slow. I'm considering using a scythe, but I would have to write a JHA. Do you have one available, or is there a way I can get a JHA? I have no idea what to write on this.
That's interesting. I don't have a JHA for scythe. It's kind of like any other sharp tool.
Uh-huh.
Um, and it's interesting. You can't cut your own feet with the scythe. You can cut somebody else's feet. So that's just the way they work.
Yeah, keep
Um,
your time, I guess.
Now, what I found on woody brush, again, if it's really heavy and thick, you got to use the loppers and the shears and the hand saws. But once you get it knocked back, you can knock down the annual regrowth off the ground really quick with a brush scythe. And that's what we've been doing on a few trails that we heavily brushed out. We get back there every year, and then we knock back the regrowth.
Thank you.
Um, I see the picture about fitting them to volunteers. I have the adjustable European snaths, and so when somebody comes, I can kind of check how tall they are versus me, and then I have some set up for taller people, and if I need to, I can pretty quickly in the parking lot adjust the grips. Um, and so I think there's another question there. You take it into the field assembled. Do take a couple of tools with you just in case the grip comes loose or you need to tighten up the blade.
Yeah, do you carry it in with the sheath on it?
Yeah, I
Oh.
keep the blade on it because they are pretty sharp.
Hmm.
But yeah, the danger is you'd accidentally run your hand across it.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate the folks who participated in your interest in this topic. I do think scythes might be an overlooked traditional tool, and they're fun.
Yeah, that was so cool, Paul. I'm super sold. I like want one right now.